All right, everybody, time for our next lesson. Go ahead and start, as we always do, by putting your name and number at the top of your page in the upper right. And the title, still Module 1 Notes. Still making our way through Module 1. Today we are going to take a look at lesson number 4. So we'll put a Roman numeral 4. Roman numeral 4 is a 5, but one less. So Roman numeral, looks like IV, Roman numeral 4, Module 1-4, converting metric measurements. Okay. We're going to convert metric measurements. Now, we don't actually have a lot of vocabulary to go over this time. It's kind of built into what we're going to be doing. But I do have a few big ideas I'd like to start with. Okay. So let's start with some basic principles. Basic principles. These are your big ideas. So make sure you focus on these as we go through. Okay. First thing I want you to keep in mind. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make sure we can see everything. If you are going from a large measurement, there we are. If you're going from something that's big, and I don't mean that the number is big, I mean the unit of measurement is big. Let's say we're going from a meter, which is about the length. If I stick my arms out, it's from the distance from fingertip to fingertip, one arm to the other. If you're going from something like that to a smaller measurement, like a centimeter, which is just about my pinky nail there. If you're going from big to small, you're going to be doing some multiplication. You're going to multiply, and I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. On the other hand, if you start with a smaller unit, say again, you start with the centimeters, but this time you're going up. You go to a big measurement like meters or kilometers. In that case, you are going to divide. So, if the unit is big, you're going to, well, if it's big and you're going to small, you're going to multiply. If it's small and you go big, you're going to divide. Okay. Now, the last thing we're going to mention is a property of multiplication. It's called the identity property. The identity property of multiplication. Now, this is a fancy math name for something simple that most of you learned pretty early on. The identity property of multiplication says when one of two factors is 1. So if you are multiplying two things, two factors, and one of them is 1, okay, the product will always be the other factor. Basically, if you multiply something times 1, the something stays what it was before. 5 times 1 is 5. 7 times 1 is 7. All right. Hopefully some pretty basic ideas, but I want them on the top of the paper so we have them. Moving down, let's take a look at some metric measurement. Let's take a look at some metric measurement. Now I'm going to start by drawing a little chart. On your paper, try to find where about the center would be. Right about here, probably under the T, depending on where your handwriting is, how far out you went. I'm going to drop down a line, okay, and I am going to put a 1. This is going to be whatever unit of measure I'm working with. Earlier I mentioned stretch out my arms, measure the distance from, say, my left hand to the tip of my right hand. That would be about a meter. A meter is a metric measurement of length. Think distance from point A to point B, going from one direction to the other. Okay. Now, we use a lot of meters in the classroom because they're pretty easy to measure, but it's obviously not the only unit that we use. So I'm going to go ahead and fill my table in a little bit here. We also use, slide that up, we also use the gram. Now a gram is if we are measuring how much mass something has. A lot of times we end up just quickly saying, well, it's how heavy it is. Not exactly. A gram is really how much mass, how much stuff something is made of. Now, if you're measuring it on Earth, that ends up being the same as the weight, but that's a science question for later. The last one we're going to talk about today is a liter. A liter is if you are measuring a liquid. Liter liquid, liter liquid. I love alliteration. A liter is if you are measuring liquid. Now each of these is going to stay in the center. Okay, I'm going to use a ruler because you all have to stare at this video, but yours doesn't have to be quite that straight. Now, just like with place value charts, as we move left or right, things are going to get 10 times bigger or 10 times smaller. This is one of the reasons the metric system is so nice. The metric system is built on the same base 10 system we use for counting in math anyway. So here's our ones column, the unit column, 1 meter, 1 gram, 1 liter. Now, if I want to get 10 times bigger, so think of this kind of as your tens column. Again, here's your ones column. If I want to get 10 times bigger, I add the prefix deca. Decameter, decagram, decaliter. 10 meters, 10 grams, 10 liters. Okay. We use these abbreviations, so we don't have to write that out every time, but it's nice and consistent. It follows a pattern. Okay. If you want to go up 100 times, so now we want to get even larger, we use the prefix hecto. Hectometer, hectogram, hectoliter. 100 meters, 100 grams, 100 liters. Okay. Now, I don't expect you to memorize all this, but if you write it down, you can at least refer back to it later. Especially this column that we're going to do all the way over on the left now. This one is probably the most commonly used. If you have 1,000 meters, if you have 1,000 grams, if you have 1,000 liters, you have a kilometer. Now, we don't say kilometer, we say kilometer, but we do kind of say kilogram, kiloliter. Okay. If you have 1,000 kilometers, excuse me, let me say that a different way. If you have 1 kilometer, that is 1,000 meters. If you have 1 kilometer, that's 10 hectometers, 100 decameters, or 1,000 meters. We'll spend more time with that in class. Let me wrap up by showing you, okay, let's go into the decimals. Now I'm going to write it as a fraction because that's the way we read it, but you can think of this as 0.1. If you want 1/10 of a meter, you're dividing a meter into 10 pieces. Those pieces are decimeter. If you ever heard the word decimate, okay, that means to make something smaller by a power of 10. So once again, we have a decimeter, decigram, and deciliter. Some of these sound kind of funny. We don't always use these very often. We do use something in the next column, 100th, or rather 100th of a unit. We use the prefix centi. So let's make sure the I gets in there. Okay, I'll clean that up a little bit, but cent, like century, or more accurately, more relevant I should say, cent. There's 100 cents in a dollar. There are also 100 centimeters in a meter. 100 centigrams in a gram, 100 centiliters in a liter. Finally, out to the thousandths place, we use milli. Millimeter. Okay. If you take a look at a ruler like the one I've been using, here's the centimeters across the top, those tiny little lines. Those are the milliliters. Okay. All right, millimeters. Millimeters. Milligram, and there's milliliter, sorry. All right. To convert metric units, and again, we're going to talk more about this in class, so we're not going to do a ton of practice right now. But I do want you to write this down. To convert metric units, use what you know about multiplying. I like to use an ampersand every once in a while. You don't have to. Multiplying and dividing with powers of 10. Okay. So we're going to wrap up here pretty quick. Let me show you just maybe 2 or 3 quick examples. All right. Let's say that I have 2 3/10 kilometers, and I want to convert that to some number of meters. First of all, think back to what we wrote in the beginning. I am going from a big unit of measure to a small one. A kilometer is closer to a mile. It's a pretty big measurement. I'm going from big to small. Something on the left, I'm moving to the right. There's your meter right there. When I go from big to small, that means I'm going to multiply. Okay, that's great. How do I know what to multiply by? Just count. 10, 100, 1,000. To get from here to here, 1, 2, 3 jumps means 1, 2, 3 zeros, means I'm multiplying by 1,000. That means all of this is going to shift over to the left 3 spots. So your final answer should be 2,300 meters. Okay. If I'm going the other way, let's say I have 673 centimeters, and I want to figure out how many, let's pick something fun. Let's find a hectometer. Or rather, let's find out how many hectometers. Okay. First of all, am I going from big to small or from small to big? Well, I'm moving this way, which means I'm going from a small measurement to a larger one. If I'm going from small to big, that means I'm dividing. Whoops, there we go. Means I'm dividing. And I will just count how many spots over I go. Divide by 10. Divide by 100. Divide by 1,000. Divide by 10,000. Oh boy. Okay. That's a little bigger than what we've done so far. But it's really not a problem. We're just going to move things over 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. If you work that out on a number line, on a place value chart, you try a number line too, but place value chart's what I meant, you should end up with 673 ten-thousandths of a hectometer. Now that's pretty small, and it goes out to the 4th decimal place. You're not going to see too many like that in class. But we are going to stop here for now so that you can do the rest in class. As always, please make sure you bring your notes with you. If you have any questions, we'll go over them together. I will see you in class. Thanks, everybody.